Learning to work with buyers is probably the most important skill early on for a couple reasons. One, at the beginning of your real estate career, you will work with far more buyers than sellers, and sometimes even 5 or 10 years in, you might be more buyer heavy than seller heavy. Buyers just come more naturally to a new agent and really to all agents. So you want to be more skilled in that area because those are your clients are. Secondly, anyone who buys a home, unless they own it until the end of time, they will eventually sell it. And so if I can encourage everyone, even from the very beginning, if you've worked with no buyers or just a few buyers, or you're getting tired of buyers, it's to please not lose your enthusiasm for buyers. It can be tiring to add another one and when the market's difficult, but please know your buyers can be your best referral source. They can be a guaranteed listing in several years, 5 or 10 years. Once you earn them as your client, they're yours. And unless you lose them, they're yours to keep and yours to list their home. And oftentimes the parents come to help the first time buyer. And so you just get a lot of activity around a person buying a house. And so please, it can be tiring, but don't lose the enthusiasm for how special buyers are and the relationship that you can have. Today we're going to talk real specifically about how to counsel buyers and how to guide buyers and some of the activities to take them through. We want you to be efficient in how you work with buyers, not only for them, but for your own time. Without a good plan in place, you can spend many hours, tens and 20, hundreds of hours of time with buyers that might not be necessary. And ultimately, we want you to skillfully guide buyers to allow them to buy a home, but be doing that with a lot of people at the same time. And so to do that, you want to have a plan in place and have some certain proficiencies and be able to do things efficiently. I'm a huge proponent for bringing buyers into the office before you ever look at a house. And to me, that exercise alone is probably the single most important skill, and sometimes the most challenging part is how do you get a buyer to come into the office to meet with you. You know, buyers will come from all sorts of sources, and some, depending on the source, they're easier to convert to become your buyer and have them come to the office, and others it becomes more challenging. So the easy ones, you get a referral, someone calls you and says or emails you, you help so-and-so buy a house, would you help us? You know, we've never done this before, we don't even know where to start. You know, what are our first steps? That is the ideal position to be in. They're waiting for your advice and counsel, and you can tell them, besides how wonderful it is, you're looking for your first home, the best first thing is that we would find a time to meet together at the office, at my office or coffee shop, whatever the best location is, so that we can sit down to cover all sorts of helpful information. It's your first home. There's a lot of things you don't know, and a lot of things I want you to know, so you can be the most educated buyer and most informed client. So to sit down together allows me to gather some information from you about what you're looking for. We can talk about the process and what are all the steps between now, the day we're sitting down together and the day you get the keys to your new house. What are inspections like and appraisals? What costs are involved, and you can go through what closing costs are and down payments. Even before they've even met with a lender, you can be the expert who is giving them a lot of that information. And then, of course, in your time together, they can be interviewing you and you them to see if you are both a good fit to be working with one another. So that's the referral buyer. That's the easiest. They're waiting for your cue. That requires a lot less skill. You just suggest that we should sit down together, and we'll talk about, well, what do you do when you sit down together. I think the real challenge comes with converting those internet lead buyers or sign call buyers, maybe an open house buyer, the people who don't know you and they have a desire to purchase a home. They've expressed that. They even have a specific property they might desire to see. And your job, knowing what's best, is to actually find that time to sit down together, because that does make the process more fruitful. That is a more challenging dialogue, and so we'll talk about that. We'll save that for just a little bit. Probably because it's important to discuss, why is it important to bring a buyer into the office? Why not just go look at a house, They have an address, you go look at it, and that is an easy temptation to fall into. Someone asks about a house, you say, I can be there in 5 minutes, and can you? that is a good way to misuse some of your time, and a bad way to qualify buyers to make sure you're working with all the people you are supposed to. I want you to be able to control your time and work in a way that's best for you and best for the buyer. So a couple of real benefits to getting them to come into the office. One, it just simply qualifies, are they a quality, serious buyer or not? The person who absolutely refuses to ever sit with you, ever talk with you, come into your office, I just want to see this house right now. I know from experience it's probably not a ready, willing, and able buyer. Yes, there are some exceptions, but generally the buyer that says, I just have to see that house. Well, if you could peek behind the curtain or ask enough questions, you might soon realize they're not qualified at all. They aren't even thinking of really buying for 2 years. This is just kind of fun. My agent is out of town and I don't know who else to show me this property. I'm already working with an agent. Actually, I'm kind of thinking of building a new house and I want to look at how that existing home has a redesigned their kitchen. I mean, that is a total misuse of your time to go show a house to a person who has no willingness to want to work with you or even an ability to buy a house. So just the idea of, before we do that, could we sit down together? The person who refuses, you may certainly work with. Just as you get further along in your business, you'll probably realize there's better buyers to work with than that person who's not willing to sit down together. So it just qualifies buyers to bring them into the office. It allows you to gather some information that you need to be sitting and typing or taking notes where you can actually listen to what they are looking for. That allows you to better serve them. Kind of helps you sort out what exactly it is they're looking for to narrow down their criteria. You know, it's kind of a funny dynamic I'll get sometimes is maybe the family buying the home for a student to go to Creighton. And so they wish to be close to Creighton, that's important proximity to school, but then they have a wish list of very modern house features, open concept, garage spaces, not wanting what they might say a scary basement, a house that's really updated. Well, you could run all over looking at new and looking at old, and when you're together, sitting and talking with no distraction of actual houses, you can talk about that. Those competing dynamics of the closer to Creighton University the house is, the older it is likely going to be, the basement is likely going to be a scarier basement. If you want the modern amenity of a garage, and if that is actually most important, then we're going to be further away from the school. I mean, you can literally sit and talk about those things and kind of hone in on exactly what they're looking for. It's also the right time to qualify them. Have they met with the lender? You can make some lender recommendations. If they have met with the lender, you can ask about, do they know about their down payment amounts? I mean, it's really meant to be educational for you to learn about them and for them to learn about the purchase process. And then sort of the last, maybe benchmark, important reason for coming into the office is so that you can do some teaching about what the process looks like. It is way easier to tell them all the steps from beginning to end when they're sitting down together as a captive audience for 10 minutes, so that when you get into the process, you can kind of reference back and remind them some things, than to never do it officially at one time, and then you're filling them in, bits and pieces on each front porch as you look at houses, or kind of for the first time actually once you're doing those things. So to tell them all those things in advance makes the process more smoothly. This is a pretty important piece of advice or a concept I think I'd like you to take to heart, and that is the idea that advice given when there is nothing to gain and nothing to lose is far better and way better received than when you're given the advice in the heat of the moment. So when you're sitting down together in your office, weeks or months or a year away from looking for a house, any advice you give at that specific time is better received, it's more sincere, it's more authentic. An example might be as you're discussing the market and how homes are selling, and together they're making reference to houses they've seen online that were gone the next day, and do they really sell that fast? And yes, they do. And boy, when they sell that fast, do the prices go up? Yes, they do. And you can talk about many good homes are selling over list price with the seller's desired closing date. You may be limiting or changing the scope of inspections. Well, when you're proposing those types of ideas, when you're just sitting at your office, you have nothing to gain or you have nothing to lose. If you don't do those things, they see the house, they love it, and then for the first time you're saying, oh, if you really do like this house, modify your inspection. To beat that guy, you have to give up your inspection, which is very difficult advice to give and something I don't recommend. You have to pay this price, you have to go for list price, you have to give up these advantages. Well, when you're doing it in the heat of the moment, it feels like you're doing it for your benefit so that you get them into the house, so that you get the commission check. When you tell them the tough advice, sitting in your office, they're not going to lose a house, you're not going to lose them as a client, it's just advice. So again, the sit down together allows for all of those things to happen. Let's talk about a dialogue or a series of questions you might use to help a person, a sign call, maybe the internet lead, let's say not the referral buyer. Those are the easy ones. The more difficult buyers, what dialogues you should use to guide them to understand that we should meet together at the office. If you are going to do open houses, or you're going to be receiving internet leads, Zillow leads, sign calls from a team member, or even on your own listings, I get very good at this dialogue, because this is the difference between, you want to see this house, great, I show it to you tonight at 7 p.m. I missed my exercise or the birthday party I'm going to, with the allure of you're going to see a house, we've never met, what if you like me, what if you buy it? You look at it, they don't like the house, they don't get to know you, you never see them again. I mean, that's obviously misuse your time. So this conversation you have is a difference between racing out and showing it to them once and you never see them again, and maybe converting that person who has been doing that, calling around, converting them to be a ready, willing, and able buyer who likes and trusts you and wants to work with you. Let's see if I can demo that conversation a little bit. And let's pretend it's the internet lead and they inquire on a random property, right? Click the thing, I want to see it, and then it comes to you and you get them on the phone. I'm calling, hey, this is Ben. Thanks for your inquiry about whatever the pick your address is. How can I help you? Yes, I'd love to see it. We're just thinking of buying a house, or we're kind of curious about that one. They'll say whatever they're going to say. I know that I have a series of questions, conversation, ultimately get to one most important question, and I'll share that. So as we're chatting, things I want to gather from them is, oh, is this your first house? Yes, it is. Well, that is wonderful, and I'm so excited for you. Very cool you guys are looking to purchase your first home. That tells me they maybe don't have an agent, they don't know the process. They're looking for someone who's going to help them. So I like that, and oftentimes these sign calls and things and internet leads can be a first-time buyer. So I want to get to that piece of information. I want to ask them, have you been looking for a while, or is this the very first house that got you excited? If it's the very first house that got them excited, great. They've actually talked with no agents then. This is literally their first step into real estate. Wonderful. If they say, oh yeah, we've been looking for months and months and months, red flag goes off. Why is it taking that long? They've obviously interacted with dozens of agents at that point. Why are they not working with one? Do they actually have one? So they've been looking for a few weeks but haven't found something they like. Okay, great. Can I ask, how have you been looking at those homes? Are those open houses, or are you making appointments and looking at those with agents? If their answer is, oh, with an agent, they're just out of town and we don't know who else to call. Well, that's not a buyer for you. They've already been claimed by another agent. You ask 2 questions. Now you know not to miss the birthday party or your workout, to go show them a house. So you can politely say, well, your agent can help you with that, and I can give them a call if you want. Basically, you determine quickly that you don't need to misuse your time with them. The person who says, been looking at a few, sometimes we're calling agents off of signs and a couple open houses. I mean, that's the person who's ready to be captured. So you're leading up to this most important question. You're filling in with a little chit chat and, have you seen anything you liked, and how has that gone looking at houses? Ultimately, I think the best question to deliver is, have you guys, your husband, wife, whoever it is, have you specifically picked an agent to work with? Or more importantly, have you interviewed several realtors to find the person who is the best fit for you? In my experience, have you interviewed several realtors is like the golden question. It's kind of disarming, kind of surprising. It plants a seed in their mind that you should be interviewing, and they don't even realize you should. Some buyers, too many buyers, find a realtor completely on accident, and I don't think that leads to success. And so it's kind of novel question to ask if they have interviewed several realtors. And oftentimes the answer is, well, no, we're not sure. We don't really know exactly what we're doing. We kind of have a family friend who's maybe a realtor. And so, whatever their answer may be, after you ask that type of question, then you follow up with your version of a dialogue that goes something like this. Well, if I can give you a piece of advice, it's that you really do interview several realtors. I think that's really critical. You find the person who's the very best fit for you, and you do that by talking with several. I'd be totally pleased to do that with you, and frankly, I think that's the very best way to start. I would like to invite you to my office so that we could sit down together for a couple of reasons. One, you can interview me and see if I'm a good fit for you, and if I work in the way you want and communicate the way you want, and that's important for you. Also, you mentioned it's your very first home, so I know there's a lot of things that you should know, so you're the most educated as you begin looking for a house. So when we're sitting down together, I'd like to give you all that information. I'd like my clients to be the most informed. We'll talk about everything that's going to happen between now and the day you get the keys to your new house. Talk about inspections, appraisals, what timing to work within. I'll tell you all the costs involved. And we'll talk about exactly what you're looking for in a house, and we can make a plan for how to find it. And then the close I like to use is, would that type of meeting, would that be helpful to you, or is that the type of information that'd be helpful to you? And most people who are legitimately wanting to buy a house, and you've been kind and courteous on the phone, made all that offering, will say, you know what, I kind of think we would. Great, you make the appointment. It's those questions leading up to, have you interviewed several agents? No, great, I'd love to interview with you. Have you interview me, guide you through this process, explain it all to you. Would that be helpful to you? And then you make the time for the appointment. So to me, that is the most challenging part, to have that conversation. Get them into the office. Once they're in the office, that is a total breeze. I've had agents actually say, oh, I don't mind getting them into my office or into the office, but I don't know what I even talk about with them this whole time. Okay, that is the easy part. We'll talk about what to talk about with them. I'd encourage you to more be working on this dialogue you will use, ultimately inviting them to come into the office. Once they're with you in the office, there's just a way, way better chance that you convert them to be your buyer. And I've had the signed calls before. It was several years ago. They called on 4 properties, talked to 4 listing agents. Each listing agent went out and ran out and showed them the house, except for me, did the whole dialogue. They came into my office first. We talked for our hour or 90 minutes. Then we went and we looked at this particular house, and guess what? They did not like that house at all. It wasn't the right fit for them, but they knew they liked me because as a professional, I gave them 2 free hours of guidance and counsel and professional time, and all those other agents did is say, can you get out there right away? So they saw 4 houses, met 4 agents, like none of the houses. 3 of the agents made no impact. Of course, they said, hey, the way you treated us, you offered us things no one else did. We would please like to work with you. So that's why it's important to be skillful at this, to come to the office so you can prove your value. Let's talk about that buyer appointment when they come into the office. I call them a new buyer appointment. That's why I put them in my calendar. That time they've come into the office, what are you going to accomplish while you were there? I have a questionnaire of all sorts of questions that I fill out. I just want to professionally take notes. They know I'm listening and I'm gathering some information. You can type it in your computer, but I would take the notes so you are not the agent who oftentimes people say, I told them I wanted this, and they kept showing me that, and it feels like they never listened to me. I encourage you to listen, take the notes, and follow those exactly, and that's relatively simple. Here's all the pieces of information I want to gather from them. Besides their information, emails, phone numbers, how do they like to communicate? That's a nice question. Text, email, call. Always ask them for their address. I know it feels kind of weird. You're asking someone for an address. They live in an apartment. They don't know you. I used to struggle with that. Now I just very casually say, and may we begin with your current address. You write it down for the sole purpose of, you will send them a thank you card after the appointment the next day. So you treated them like a professional, you invited them into the office, you gave them 90 free minutes of time, you sent them a thank you card. So you did all of that. The other realtor they called said, I can have someone show it to you like in 5 minutes, but you need to get out there now. Well, who do you think they might pick? They'll pick you because you've taken all this time with them. The other questions I asked them is, and we'll go through these one at a time. I like to ask them about their timing. So when do they need to move? Do they have a lease? Yep, it's up in 2 years from now. Well, they're probably not ready to be looking now. My lease is up in 30 days from now. Okay, let's counsel them on you're going to need to extend their lease. I ask them where would they like to live. Most people have a general boundary of Midtown, east to 72nd, west to 32nd, Maple to Center. That's what Midtown. People say school districts. People say, I want to live somewhere that's close to work. Okay, I don't know what that means. Is that 5 minutes? Is it? Those are simple questions. Take good notes. Oftentimes people will say, I don't want to live anywhere scary, anywhere that's dangerous. Just know we cannot guide them on places they can and cannot live for their safety. It can be discrimination. Most people, if you ask them, well, tell me, what would be unsafe for you or where don't you want to live? They'll give you a geographic boundary. I will draw a square. I'll make labels on where those places are and aren't, and we just focus on the places that they do. So that's how I handle that question of it has to be somewhere safe and where would that be. I like to ask them if they have seen any houses that they like. A couple addresses probably. It just lets me key into what they're looking for. If they say, we've looked for 4 years and never seen something that checks our boxes, red flag, I know we need to talk about some of their expectations, because if there's been no choices in 4 years of looking, something's not adding up. I'll ask them if I haven't done it on the phone, the idea of the interview, I'll ask them, have you interviewed any other realtors yet? Or have you interviewed any realtors? They'll say, no, not yet. And I say, are you planning on doing it? Some will say no, some will say yes. If they say yes, I say, great, you absolutely should. I want you to find a person who's a real good fit for you. Some agents will think, well, if they weren't going to talk to another agent and I've proposed the idea, isn't that counterproductive? It is not. I think it is. If you're going to treat people right, you should want them to find a person who's the best fit for you. Usually that other agent is not using that type of language. They're not inviting them to compare them to someone else. I do want buyers to compare me to another agent, because I know the way I'll treat them and the things I'll do, and I think the other agent won't. And there's a good chance the performance that agent puts on is not so good, and yours is wonderful, and it just highlights where you're the better choice. So it's okay they're meeting with others. It's the right to do so. I would never limit that. I'll ask them if they talked with any lenders. Probably not. Not if they're a first-time buyer. They're maybe going to talk to their bank. Great. Am I okay to make some recommendations to you? Absolutely. I always give them a handful of recommendations. I ask them what features they would like in a home. Listen, take notes. Bedrooms, bathrooms, garage, fenced yard, move-in ready, some projects. I'm okay with just painting. Whatever they say, you're taking notes and you're listening to them. And lastly, I will ask if there's anyone else who will be looking at the houses with us. That is a very key question. Mostly lets you know if there's going to be some parents participating. Maybe parents are giving a gift fund or some monies as a gift, so now they have an opinion that's more valuable, so they need to be our participant. Maybe they'll say, my dad just comes and he is very opinionated. Mostly I ask so I'm prepared to know who else we need to participate with. I always give a quick spiel about it's wonderful if your parents come, happy to have them. Please know that even if your parents are wonderfully relaxed and cool, you'd be surprised how opinionated and cautious they get when their wonderful child that they love is buying a house. So it'll be, kind of funny to see how your parents react. I want you to know, buyer, I care most about your opinion. I will always respect your parents' opinion, but you're making the mortgage payment for 360 months for 3 decades, so your opinion is always most important to me. It's important not to go through all those questions on the phone. It's real funny to ask them everything, talk them halfway through the purchase process over the phone, and then say, and I'd really like you come into my office so I can get to know all this information about you, talk about the purchase process. You sort of shot yourself in the foot. So I will specifically ask little on the phone so that I don't take away my reasoning for getting them together, for getting together in the office. So just, that's an easy trick, or a trick you can fall into is you're on the phone, you just feel like I gotta keep this conversation going. Well, you've asked them everything and then they have no need to come meet with you. Sometimes the interview, the whole thing happens over the phone. I might even schedule another phone call. Here's our 5-minute conversation. Can we take a long phone call so we can do all these things? because I want to have a real designated time to, uninterrupted, that we're an audience with one another. We can go through these topics. I would become educated with lending products, guidelines, down payment amounts. You want to be the expert to these buyers. Yes, a lender's doing the financing, you're doing the home purchase process. There's plenty of crossover knowledge, but when you are asking them if they've met with a lender, what is a good what is the purchase price you want? What's the monthly payment you're looking for? It is wise to be equipped with. They want to spend $200,000. They want their payment to be $1,000. Those don't match up, and you can talk about a home at this price has this payment. And so I would be educating yourself as a buyer says, well, what do I need as a down payment? I don't know, 3%, 5%. There's 20%, VA 0%. You want to educate them on those things. That's easier research to do. Oftentimes they ask what other costs are involved. Of course, those are the closing costs. I will go through a full estimated cost sheet with the buyer where I will talk them through all of the costs. Basically, so I can tell them you need a down payment of a percentage of the price of the home. That's quite easy. And then you have closing costs of about $7,000 on a $175,000 house. Down payment plus about $7,000. That's real valuable information. That's what they need to know. Oftentimes, you tell them down payment is $7,000 for a total of $17,000. I'll ask them, is that a scary number? Is that more or less than you anticipated? And some people will say, we had no knowledge of that. We're almost a little embarrassed. I think it's going to be like a whole year from now we can, we got to save up to be able to buy a home. That is great. You tell them that up front versus look at 10 houses, then you write an offer, then you tell them they need $17,000. They do not have it. Sale falls apart. They're heartbroken. They take the year off and you begin again. It's totally worth your time to get to know them, establish the monies they do and don't have in this conversation, determine they're not going to look for a year. They're more educated, they're more prepared. You stay in contact for the whole year. You as an agent, you want to sell houses this year and next year and the year after. So I think it's great if I already have some business that I'm going to do next year because of this conversation that I had this year. The last thing you want to do is talk them through the purchase process. Obviously, you've brought them in on the allure of gathering some information and getting to know you, but then you're going to tell them everything. So I'll give you a highlighted version of what I do with the buyer. Of course, they have questions. It takes a little longer, but I do want to hit a few main points as I talk about the explanation. One, we'll begin when two things happen. You're pre-approved and you're ready to start writing a contract. So timing's right and money is right. I'll set up an automated search in the MLS. There's no wizardry to that. It just alerts us when things are listed that fit this criteria. When you get that email, look through it, maybe drive by. If you ever see a house that seems like a good fit for you, let me know and we will find a time to go see it together. Days, evenings, weekends, we'll see each other plenty. It'll be great. Let me know. I want to show you the homes that feel like a good fit for you. When we're in the house, I tell everyone the same thing. You do the fun stuff, I'll do the nerdy stuff. Age of mechanicals and how long they should last. Age of the roof approximately. Any deficiencies that exist. There will always be deficiencies in every house. Evidence of water intrusion, but a missing downspout extension, the ground slopes to the house. Those two things add up. Not so scary anymore. So we'll always talk about those things. You do the fun stuff like dog bed location and where you're going to put the Christmas tree. I'll educate you the whole time. And then we'll also talk about resale. I don't want you to buy a home you especially love, but in a location that's not so good or there's something that negatively impacts the resale, because I want it to be sellable for you as a buyer in a handful of years from now. Eventually we'll find a house that's the right fit, put an offer on it together, either in person or over the computer, and you can sign things digitally. There's a whole host of terms and conditions that make up about 20 pages worth of paperwork. We'll go through each page, you'll know what everything means. We'll put together the competitive terms and conditions, strategize. We'll do that together. We'll go to the listing agent to be presented to the seller, and we'll negotiate back and forth where the seller will pick the best of the offers submitted. Eventually, we'll have an accepted offer, and then there's a new list of activities that start, and that's what I want to highlight for you buyers. Contract goes to lender right away, title company, they do a whole bunch of work behind the scenes. Lender will ask you for documents along the way. You just provide those things to them. Pay stubs and W-2s, updated versions of those things. They'll lock in your interest rate. Title company works really behind the scenes doing a title search to make sure there are no unpaid taxes or any liens or encumbrances. Things we'll do together right away. Earnest deposit needs to be collected. That's an amount of money you put down within 48 hours that shows you are serious and intent to buy the house. Generally 1% of the price of the home. It's a personal check, goes to the title company. Cash it, hold the money, apply it to the total to what you owe at closing. So we'll do that right away, and then schedule the home inspection. All inspectors work on the same schedule. They go to our house in the morning, do all their work, look over everything. It's very thorough. Buyer and agent show up at lunchtime, and the inspector shows buyer and agent everything wrong that they found. Then inspector goes to second house of the day, starts about 1 o'clock. Same process, walkthrough will be around like 4:30 or 5. So we'll just schedule that on a day and time we can all be available at lunchtime or the end of the day, and I'm happy to make some recommendations of home inspectors to you. After the home inspection, contracts read. There's 3 days where you have to make a pretty important decision, and you have 3 choices. We'll make that choice in writing. Your choices following inspection is buy it just like it is because it's great, do not buy it at all, cancel everything, earnest deposit is returned. You've obviously eaten the cost of the home inspection, but earnest deposit be returned. Lastly is to make some requests for things to be repaired. It's normally a handful of items. A seller's not going to fix everything wrong. There's usually more than one thing wrong. It's usually like a handful, 4 or 5 or 6 things. Make the request in writing. We negotiate those back and forth with the seller, and we agree on some amount of repairs and move forward. We disagree, sale falls apart, earnest deposit is returned. Lender sends out an appraiser, a third party, to make sure the house is worth what you're paying for it and what they're loaning on it. We don't attend that. If there's an issue where the value is perceived to be less than the price, we do have to renegotiate those things with the seller at that time. Title company will send out a termite inspector to make sure there's no wood destroying insects. We don't attend that at all. Once the appraisal is back, your file goes to the underwriter, kind of the big decision maker on behalf of the bank or the lending institution. They review everything a final time and tell us you are clear to close. So we're working our way towards closing. We talked about it takes about 45 days at this point from the time we write an offer and it's accepted to the day we get to closing. So, working our way along. 10 days before closing, we'll remind you to switch utilities, to have them switched into your name at the new house on the day of closing. Eventually, you'll do the same thing at your apartment, but in reverse, they'll take them out of your name the day you move out of your apartment. So that's 10 days out. 3 days out, we will conduct a final walkthrough to make sure the house is in the condition it was in the day you decided to buy it. There's no new deficiencies, no surprise stains on the ceiling. And then any repairs we ask to be made that the sellers agreed to, we want to verify those things are made. Also, 3 days before closing, lender and title will put together a closing disclosure. It's a 4-page document. It's all the credits and debits, all the mathematics of the sale, price, earnest deposit, your homeowner's insurance cost, which is something you can start shopping for once we have a house under contract. Credits, debits, spits out a final number. That final number, that's the big chunk of monies. You'll bring that on the day of closing, either wired to the title company or a cashier's check, where you go to the bank, they pull the monies out of your account, and they give you a cashier's check for that. The earnest deposit and the inspection costs, which you pay for at time of service, personal checks. If they're going to give you a house in exchange for the money, it has to be a cashier's check so they know the money's there. So on the day of closing, you'll bring your monies. You'll bring your valid government-issued photo ID, non-expired driver's license. You'll sit with myself, a lender, someone from the title company, sign all the documents. It takes about 30 minutes, give over the monies, and then you get the keys. So that's the process from beginning to end. We'll go through it many times. I've been through it many, many times. I'm here to guide you through it. I'll always tell you what comes next. So that's my explanation of the purchase process. Without even realizing it, you're giving the buyer a lot of education and setting a lot of expectations about what's a proper earnest deposit. How many repairs per se do you get when you're asking for things to be fixed? It ends up being a handful. When is the walkthrough? It's going to be 3 days prior. When you're educating and setting those expectations, you are creating a more educated buyer, informed, more reasonable, kinder, buyer. It's going to be a more fruitful experience for both of you. So please don't discredit that time spent in the office. It is totally worth it if I've not convinced you of that already. If I can go back to a couple of things from the very beginning, please don't tire of buyers, even if you're years and years and years in. They're rewarding and they're fun, and so many referrals could come from that. And secondly, please bring buyers into the office. I've established that. And then be working on a conversation that allows you to make that suggestion of the interviewing realtors, and that is valuable to you as a buyer. And please let me do that for you. Of course, you want that to be, fitting for you, however you steer that conversation, but I think that's the entryway, is the interview, and allow me to do that and educate you. Hope that was helpful to you. Best of luck when working with buyers. Always want to be helpful to you. If you need anything further, you can always call, or you can attend one of these appointments with me when I'm meeting with a buyer. I just want your time working with buyers, building your real estate career, especially early on with buyers. I want to be fruitful and rewarding for you. So please let me know if I can do anything else. Thank you.